So here's what happened next, and honestly, if you think part 2 was unsettling, this is where the true nightmare unfolds, because after Elisa Lam's body was discovered in that rooftop water tank, the world suddenly realized just how impossible her final hours were, and Daniel, the man who sent me this story, told me he still can't sleep thinking about it, because he claims that when the police opened that tank, the smell was overpowering, the water completely blackened and freezing, and yet, no one could explain how she had climbed up there by herself, because the ladder was too tall, the tanks too heavy, and the surrounding roof area was narrow and dangerous, almost as if the hotel itself didn't want anyone to reach that spot, but something had guided her there, something unseen, something patient, almost intelligent, and Daniel said he spoke to one of the detectives who worked the case, and that officer admitted privately that when they recovered her body, the markings on her arms and hands suggested she had been holding onto something, maybe a ledge or a pipe, for a long time, struggling, trying to keep herself afloat, but the strange part was that there were no fingerprints, no smudges, nothing else in the area that would indicate anyone else had been there, which meant she had climbed, fought, and survived until the last moments completely alone, yet the evidence suggested a presence, an influence, that cannot be explained by logic. And Daniel told me that in the days following, the elevator footage alone became a phenomenon, because experts, analysts, and random viewers all over the world noticed the same unexplainable things, her hands moving strangely, as if she were interacting with someone invisible, the shadow in the corner of the elevator that sometimes seemed to shift or elongate when she moved, the doors opening and closing in ways that the elevator could not physically do, and even the police couldn't account for. The time gaps in the video, moments where the camera appeared to glitch as if someone, or something, was standing directly in front of it, distorting the pixels, hiding in plain sight. Daniel said that a few hotel guests who were staying on the lower floors during that time reported hearing a girl's voice echoing through the stairwell, faint but desperate, saying, "Help me, please," but when anyone went to check, the stairwell was empty, the doors locked, and the echoes ceased, leaving a lingering coldness in the hallway. He also mentioned that the night staff often described seeing her silhouette in the hallways, moving slowly, dripping wet, with her hair covering her face, and Daniel told me that one security guard, who refused to give his name, claimed that he saw her on a surveillance camera on the night she went missing, standing perfectly still in a hallway for several minutes, then suddenly vanishing, like she was never there at all, which made the footage even more eerie because when they checked the timestamp, nothing else had moved in the frame, no people, no animals, no shadows, yet she disappeared right before their eyes. But here's the worst part, the thing Daniel insisted I include because it terrified him the most. After Elisa's body was taken away, the rooftop water tank was drained and cleaned, but guests reported strange things immediately after. People staying in rooms near the roof claimed the water tasted metallic and heavy, their tap sometimes spraying dark liquid for a few seconds before returning to normal, and several reported hearing splashes on the roof at night, footsteps moving around, like someone, or something, was testing the tanks, waiting for the next victim. Daniel said that even employees avoided going near the tanks, whispering that the rooftop was cursed, and he added that the hotel management quietly reinforced the locks, alarms, and ladders, but no one could prevent the unseen force that seemed to linger, because it didn't need the roof, the ladder, or the tanks. It was already inside the building, inside the shadows, following anyone who dared enter, and that included guests, staff, and investigators alike. And then Daniel told me that months after the incident, he personally walked past the Cecil Hotel at night, just to see it from the street, and he said that the building looked heavier, darker, more menacing than ever before. He described the windows as black holes, reflecting nothing, like they were eyes staring back at him, and for a few terrifying seconds, he swore he saw her, the silhouette of a girl standing behind the glass, hair covering her face, arms outstretched slightly, watching him as he walked past, and then, in the next moment, she was gone. Daniel said that night he didn't sleep, he couldn't eat, he couldn't stop thinking about the elevator, the tank, the whispers, the shadows, and he told me that to this day, the Cecil Hotel remains a place where fear isn't a feeling you get for a moment, it's an environment, it's a presence, it's alive, and Elisa Lam was the first to show the world that some places are more than just buildings. Some places contain something that doesn't belong to time or space, something that is patient, something that watches and waits, and Daniel said that what we saw in the videos, what we read in the news, is only the tip of the iceberg, because the unseen events leading up to her final moments were far more horrifying than anyone can imagine, moments that no footage can ever capture, moments that witnesses hesitate to even whisper about. And this is where part 3 ends, because in part 4, I will tell you about the aftermath, the dark rumors, the unexplainable events that followed, and the chilling truths that still haunt the Cecil Hotel today, truths that make this story not just tragic, but terrifying beyond comprehension. So now we come to the final part of this horrifying story, the aftermath of what happened to Elisa Lam and the terrifying legacy that the Cecil Hotel carries even today, and Daniel, the person who emailed me all of this, insisted I include every detail, because what happened after her death is almost as disturbing as the events leading up to it. He said that in the weeks following her disappearance and the discovery of her body, the hotel became a focal point for paranormal investigators, journalists, and curious onlookers, but even those professionals admitted that no rational explanation could account for the feelings, the sensations, and the strange occurrences that happened inside that building, and Daniel told me that he spoke to a retired investigator who had visited the hotel multiple times, and this officer said that the hallways seemed to pulse with a presence, that he could feel something watching him, breathing behind doors, even though no one else was there, and he confessed that the hair on the back of his neck stood on end for hours at a time, that he sometimes refused to even walk the corridors alone, because whatever haunted that place had a weight, a malevolence, a consciousness that was unmistakable, and Daniel told me that employees reported similar experiences, from faucets suddenly turning on to elevators behaving erratically, doors opening and closing without cause, lights flickering in patterns that seemed intentional, almost like someone, or something, was signaling to the people inside, and Daniel said that guests frequently reported seeing Elisa herself after her death, a wet, dark figure appearing in hallways late at night, moving silently, watching them, disappearing when approached, leaving an overwhelming sense of cold dread, and what terrified Daniel most was that these sightings weren't just random, they seemed purposeful, as if her spirit, or the force that had claimed her, was aware of those observing, and the very building seemed to respond to her presence. Daniel also told me that there were reports from the city itself, not just the hotel. Passers-by walking near the Cecil late at night often claimed to see figures in the windows, shapes that didn't belong to any guest or employee, moving unnaturally, stopping abruptly, staring down at the street with no explanation, and Daniel said that the more people noticed, the more these sightings escalated, almost as if the hotel itself fed off attention, the presence growing stronger with each witness, feeding on fear and fascination, and Daniel emphasized that this was not sensationalism, because he personally witnessed one event in which a man paused on the sidewalk, staring at a top-floor window, and the window darkened for a brief second as if something was closing the curtains on its own, only to open again a moment later, revealing nothing, but the man swore he had felt eyes on him, something waiting, something patient. And then there were the stories from tourists and bloggers who stayed at the hotel after the incident. Daniel said he read dozens of accounts where people described waking up to whispers in the hallways, footsteps pacing outside their doors, elevators moving on their own, sometimes stopping on their floor with no buttons pressed, and a sense of being watched, followed, or guided by an invisible presence. And even the law enforcement officers who investigated insisted that no physical explanation existed for the way the building seemed alive, almost sentient, reacting to its occupants, and Daniel noted that the darker rumors began spreading online, stories that Elisa had been lured by something that had been in the hotel for decades, that whatever followed her into the elevator had marked her as a permanent resident of the building's shadows, that she had become part of the hotel in a way no living person could ever escape, and Daniel said he personally tried to avoid thinking about these theories because they were almost too horrific to comprehend, yet he couldn't escape the images, the elevator footage, the chilling emails, the whispers from staff, the unseen eyes in the hallways, and he kept asking himself how a young woman, full of life, traveling, exploring, could end up in a situation so unnatural, so inescapably eerie. And Daniel said that after all this, he returned to the hotel once more, cautiously, just to see if anything had changed, and when he approached the main entrance at night, he swore he saw a shadow moving quickly across one of the windows, pausing for a fraction of a second as if acknowledging him, and he froze in place because he realized this wasn't just memory, it wasn't imagination, it wasn't the press or the stories. The presence of whatever had claimed Elisa Lam was still there, patient. Watching, waiting for the next person who might stumble into its domain, and Daniel told me that every time he thinks about it, his skin crawls, because he still feels the weight of that hotel pressing down, the darkness inside it alive, aware, and the terrifying realization hits him that the Cecil Hotel didn't just take Elisa Lam, it transformed her disappearance into a living nightmare. A story that continues to haunt every floor, every elevator, every rooftop, every shadow inside that building, and he said this is why he mailed me the story in the first place, to warn people, to make them understand that some buildings are more than brick and concrete, that some places are repositories for things the human mind cannot understand, and that no amount of cameras, locks, police, or logic can fully contain them. And Daniel's final words to me were, "Brother, when you tell this story, don't make it short, don't make it exciting, make it real, make it true, make people feel what it was like to be there, because the terror isn't in the act, it's in the presence that remains, and the Cecil Hotel's presence is still alive, and this, my friends, is the final part of the story, the full, terrifying reality of Elisa Lam, the haunted Cecil Hotel, and the unseen forces that make this place a horror unlike any other in the world, and I hope you understood that this story is not fiction, not dramatized, but a chilling glimpse into what can happen when a place becomes alive with darkness, and why people still whisper, still hesitate, and still fear the name of the Cecil Hotel to this day.